Welcome to the Rebuilt Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Sykes. Each week, I sit down with people who have faced life's toughest challenges and come out victorious, along with mental health experts, coaches, and leaders. We explore powerful stories of transformation, faith, and practical strategies for building a life of purpose and resilience. This is the Rebuilt Podcast. What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Rebuilt Podcast. My name is Jason, and I'm your host. On today's episode, we sat down with my guy, Coach B. Coach B is out of Washington State. He works for the DOC, and it's ironic because he actually spent majority of his early years in the Department of Corrections. So he gives some insight of what it was like going through the system, and then now he actually helps men who have gone through the system rehabilitate and really get their mind right, really helps them level up into a new way of thinking. We had some amazing conversation, and I'm really excited for you to listen to it. So let's go ahead and jump in. Hey, Coach B, how you doing?
I'm blessed. How about yourself?
Man, not bad, not bad. Well, hey, man, thanks so much for being on with us. Really looking forward to this. I know that you're going to have some valuable content to share with the listeners. For those who don't know you, though, why don't you go ahead and tell us who you are?
My name is Coach B. I come out of Thurston County. I'm a person with significant lived experience, justice impacted. I spent the majority of my adulthood and most of my childhood, starting at age 12, incarcerated and, operating within the narrative of the street life and all the things that come with it, gang impacted. And currently, I'm a certified master life coach, certified anger management specialist, parenting training specialist. In Washington State, I'm one of the lead certified peer support specialist trainers and a healthcare authority approved mentor. I founded my own nonprofit called Pursue It If You Want It, also interchangeable with Pursue It 365. Our motto is take one step a day in the right direction, and you'll end up where you want to be eventually, right? And I've sat on boards, I've won awards, I've been on podcasts. I don't often agree to do other podcasts, and that just has to do with my discernment. I've found, at least in my state, a lot of people act like they're about that, community work, and a lot of the reformed people that have organizations I have found are also being indicted for things. So I have to be really careful with, accepting of invitations and aligning myself with people, because you can look like somebody, sound like somebody, come from the same block, been to the same jails, prisons, military. But when all those things are identical and in alignment, that doesn't mean that y'all's values are. And I think that's where discernment plays a vital role in how we operate and move through life, is deciding like whose values align with mine and whose don't, and making that clear boundary and demarcation of, you stay over there, I'll stay over here. No animosity.
Yeah, man. Well, I am honored that you selected this podcast. Really am, man. Man, that's a lot to unpack already. But you said from age 12.
Yeah, the first time I was incarcerated, and there's a YouTube documentary. A good friend of mine, Scott Holber, has a YouTube channel, and he kind of offered to do it for free, just in light of he was in one of my certified peer counselor trainings as a student. And then we kind of connected. We grew up in the same area, and he was like, "Hey, I want to feature you." And so the story's out there quite a bit, but to shorten it, short and sweet, we moved up here from New York to Lacey, Washington, and I was about 12 years old, walking home from school. Some kids accosted me and my little brother, throwing racial slurs out there, making fun of the accent, things of that nature. And I had like a Swiss Army knife, which back then everybody did. They were giving out at church, right? So I took it out and was like, "Get away from me or I'll cut you," blase, blase. Told my little brother, run home. And then I went
Yeah.
to the elementary the next day, and there was officers waiting for me, like I was a hardened adult criminal. Cuffed me up, took me to their juvenile. It was hours before they even contacted my mother. So, that was a huge deal. There was like NAACP involved, and it was just a
Mm,
lot. You know what I mean? And that kind of started the anger and the trajectory of them versus me.
mm.
And that lasted for about 28 years.
Wow. Wow. So what charge did they get you on?
That one was assault 2 with a deadly weapon as a 12-year-old. I did about a week incarcerated before all the advocacy came down. I ended up doing like a year of what they call like maximum probation, where I had like a tracker and had to report often. So that was like my 12 to 13.
Wow. Wow. So how after you got done with that ordeal, you said it kind of shifted your mindset to them versus us mentality. How else did that kind of set you up for the rest of your life? Like what did that put into motion?
I mean, ultimately, my mom and dad has split up. So my mom was a single mom, moved over here from New York to live with her 2 older sisters at the time, had already moved to Lacey. And so she brought us out here from Staten Island, hoping to, switch things up. But
Mm,
obviously, it kind of had a different result. But I think it really, in New York, I wasn't really exposed to racism at that age, or, being disliked for an accent. Like, it was new.
yeah.
And then, pardon me, my older brother had already, at that time, kind of got caught up with some kids and been arrested. So it was like they were after us it was like, oh yeah, we're gonna, just like your brother. And I remember him saying that when I was 12, and they're throwing cuffs on me, like, yeah, we'll put you away too. And, making comments, because I don't know how they knew at the time, but like, you guys coming over here from the East Coast think you're A, B, C, or D. And yeah, it was just a thing. And the lack of guidance and support. And it was more like, all of a sudden I was a villain out of a comic book at 12 years old to these adult, you know,
Mm,
officers and all these things. And then it was just, after that, it was really, yeah, every engagement that I had with law enforcement following that incident was always, they really pushed out on paper whatever it was. So if I got in a fist fight, it was assault with a deadly weapon, or it was always just blown way out of proportion. Um, and all of my charges were essentially like that. And that,
yeah.
again, created that anger, and that, like, no matter
Yeah.
what I do, this is what it is. So I'm going to embrace it type of survival mentality.
Sure, sure. Yeah. And I'm sure that the more interactions you had like that, the more it just reinforced that mind frame, that identity, if you will, growing up, that this is who I am, this is how it is, I can't change it, that kind of thing.
100%, 100%.
Yeah.
So, last year I went on like a really heavy internal dive, and I learned some things, and I published like 6 different books. Most of them are workbooks. Only one is kind of like an autobiography, very short, called Coach B's 4 Cycles of Freedom. But the one that I push the most is the we are what we agree to, and that's kind of how I was able to change things for myself. Is I stopped agreeing to that narrative that was an external narrative that I accepted as my own, which was,
Yeah.
this is who you are. You're going to die in prison. You don't
Yeah.
have chances. You're not going to be able to do anything. You're not allowed, all that type of stuff. So it was like, all right, well, if this is the label, if this is, the reality of my existence, I'm going to do the best I can at it. And so
Hmm.
that's kind of where that mentality became like, all right, well, I'm not going to be just some peon and, at the whims of other people's mercy, and I'm not getting bullied, and, these types of things. So I went the opposite direction, and,
Sure.
and, and tried to, garner some sort of control over my life.
Right.
And, that put me in like higher positions within the street lifestyle.
Right. And you mentioned that you didn't have a bunch of positive influence growing up. Coming from a single mom raising you, so you didn't have much contact with your dad. I'm guessing pouring into you good stuff.
No, not growing up, not at all.
Yeah.
One of the first times we had consistent communication, I had already been probably down 4 years into my first 11-year sentence. And I remember, particularly this moment stands out in my life because of how angry I was. He remarried. I have two half siblings, but he also had a stepson that was around my age. And when he had wrote me, it was after his stepson had passed. And so, in the state that I was in, the anger, the kind of hatred I had for my father for not being around, it like sent me over the edge with how much anger and disdain I had for him when you chose to write me 4 years into somewhere where I've never left. Right. So you could have wrote any time. And I remember
Yeah.
thinking like, oh, now that you lost a son, you want to try to rekindle with one of your three up here. Like I'm like, I was super mad about that. Since then, like, we have a great relationship now. Um, and my adult life, I'm a grandfather at a young age, 42 young. So yeah, I spent a lot of time, FaceTiming my pops, and my mom's in this state. Both my full-blooded brothers are in this state as well. But I have a relationship with my half siblings in California and all that.
That's good. That's good. So, if you were to kind of change things up, if say your dad was around and say he was really coaching you positively, how do you think that would have shifted things? How you turned out in your teen years?
I mean, probably drastically different, right? When we
Yeah.
when we when we talk about, recidivism, and we talk about unpacking the whys behind
Mm,
so much recidivism, at least in our community, in the Black culture. I'm West Indian, Islander, Native American, but I look Black, so I'm in the Black culture, right, for the most part. And when it comes to the work I've done, the work I do, what I experienced in my life, it's a lack of fathers create a lack of men, and a lack of men creates a lack of mentors, right?
100%.
So absolutely, I probably would be on a trajectory to who knows what, because I'm very intelligent. When I went to college and during my incarcerated years, I made the president's list every quarter, every semester, things like that. So I know that had I been poured into differently, I would have maxed out on whatever trajectory that was. My dad was a Marine, enlisted, and got out as an E9 and still contracts. So like these are traits that are in me. My mom's super
Mm,
intelligent and was a scholar, owned businesses. So from my mom, I always had the entrepreneurial mindset. When I was young, leaving school, we had to go sit in her sewing shop and wait till we went home because the school was walking distance from where she worked. So instead of her picking us up, we'd be in her office, So I was around business and business minded adults on my mom's side. But as far as fatherhood like mentorship, it was hit and miss. Like I have some cool uncles, that when we were around them, they would say some things that I still remember, some wise
yeah.
phrases here and there.
Yeah.
But as far as like a consistent level of intentional, being poured into by a positive adult role model, it just didn't exist for me.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's absolutely correct. So you had mentioned that your first big stint in the prison was 11 years. Tell us kind of how you got yourself in that situation and what it was like 11 years in prison.
Um, so again, I think I mentioned a little earlier, when I started to have frequent contact with law enforcement, my charges were always like way trump. So this 11
Yeah.
year sentence on paper was a burglary one with a firearm and like a theft one, right? Um, oh, no, no, no. Yeah, yeah, correct. So in a nutshell, what actually happened was there was a particular person who had done something to my then girlfriend and future first wife. We just had we were 17 or so, and we broke into his house and stole some marijuana, and like what was it back then? some game systems. I forget what, like the regular PlayStation or whatever it was. It was like
Yeah,
four of
yeah.
us. It was like four of us involved in that. And then we left. Like, so there was no one there, no one harmed. It wasn't like a home invasion. No one got tied up. It was just like, yeah, I'm mad you did the thing. I went there to confront you. You weren't home. And then someone that was with us was like, he sells, let's go take it. Right. So that was in a nutshell what happened. What they charged me with was burglary in the first degree with a firearm with gun enhancements that allotted for 78 months of the 132-month sentence they ended up giving me. So they stacked 2 gun enhancements and on this charge where, mind you, when we did the thing, there was no gun present. So we left there, went to a house, hung out for an hour. At that place is where the firearm was introduced. Like I traded it for something or I picked one up. It was in the back of the car. We get arrested. We get pulled over, actually, leaving that spot with none of the things in the car from the burglary. But the way they articulate the law, the burglary first legalese is that you're supposed to break into someone's house with intent to commit a crime with a firearm. That didn't actually happen, though. The firearm came over an hour and a half later, but they conflated the two because when they pulled us over, it was in the car. And I went to trial and appeals and all kinds of things, and it was illegal across the board, and they utterly refused. I became a legal beagle while I was in prison for 10 years. Well, because I was, heavily invested in not being there,
Yeah,
right?
of course.
So I learned a lot of these things, and I learned that even a lot of my juvenile cases were illegally sentenced. And so again, more anger, more them versus me mentality and attitude. Because it's like the more I seen, like, this isn't even right. Like I would have gladly just admitted to breaking in their house. It would have been a 22-month thing and a third off in our state. I would have been home before I was 19. You know what I mean? Instead, I got out near 29. And I see people, take a life and get 7 years. So it was always that deep hatred. Like I knew, by the data that I had, that it was unfairly stacked against me. Granted, I take full accountability for the things that I was doing, but if you walk into a gas station and steal a candy bar, that's theft, right? But in my experience, I would walk into, say, somewhere, steal a candy bar, get caught a week later, and somehow that was a rob too. You see what I'm saying? Like that's the type of thing that I was dealing with, on top of living in living the street life and operating under that narrative that it was cool to, be that bad kid and do those things and catch those cases. Those were badges of honor, where it was just like, bro,
Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely. That's, I think our legal system needs some reform, to say the least.
No,
But,
for sure. Break the case, start over.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
Break a case of emergency, right? We need a whole new system.
Yeah. You mentioned something, piqued my interest. You said something about like your badge of honor on the street, what was that like kind of in, as you say, the street life? Um, you know, I don't really know much about that personally. Can you kind of explain, you know, getting caught and doing time and doing these things, how does that look to other people on the street? What is that life like?
In the 90s per se, and I'm sure it's happening now, but I'm a bit removed from the streets now. But when I was coming up, if you were gang impacted and you were in your even early teens and hadn't been to juvie or hadn't some type of verifiable altercation with the ops, they say now,
Kind of
right?
record.
Yeah, if you don't have those, back then they were called stripes, right? And there would be gang meetings where they met. We would meet once a month and talk about whatever, the things, the rules, the all the things. And again, the badges of honor was the crimes you were committing, caught or not caught. But if you were caught back then, getting out was like your, oh shit, B's back out. He just did all this time. And then you would kind of get that. And then depending on what happened during your time, if that leaked to the street. So if you're in there fighting and, just being the most, then when you get out, you kind of receive that reception from the streets. Like, this is someone to, fear and respect and not cross. And that's what, you know, created survival for me, right? Was once I got a small taste of that, and a lot of times I was just like defending myself in a situation. But the telephone game, right? So by the time
Yeah.
a simple fight in a prison reception area gets to the streets, it's like, oh, he whooped 4 people and 2 guards, right? It becomes legendary as long as there isn't, as long as you win, essentially.
Sure.
As long as you come out on top of whatever the altercation is, it will snowball into legendary proponents. And so, knowing that and being the intellect that I always was growing up, I took advantage of that as a mechanism for survival, right? The more people talked, the more people feared or respected or went the other way when I came, the safer I was. So a lot of it was defense by offense, right? I do certain things to kind of mitigate how many people challenge me in the future. That was
Yeah.
kind of my mentality. I was always a little skinny kid back then. I didn't gain any significant amount of weight or even muscle mass until probably 5 years into that first 11-year bid. I was like 140 pounds most of my career on the streets. So I had to be pretty extreme to really get the bigger, older gentleman to be wary of crossing my paths in the negative way. And again, all of it was to protect myself. It wasn't that when I look back, I didn't enjoy that lifestyle. I just believed in the narrative that was this was my deck of cards, and I couldn't change the deck, and I couldn't do anything but play him. So it was like, okay, either I'm a bullied or I'm bullied. Either I'm, at the top of the gang, or I'm a mission boy for the gang. So
Sure.
if those are my options, logically, I would rather
Right.
be sending people than being sent.
Yeah. Right. So tell us about what changed, what shifted, what happened that really started to challenge that identity. Was it when you were incarcerated? Was it when you're out? Somebody come into your life? Kind of when did that shift take place, and how did that happen?
Well, if we're talking about thoughts of changing,
Mhm.
like when we talk about, like, for example, the model of the stages of change, for example, right? There's that pre-contemplation stage where you don't think anything's wrong with what you're doing. You don't need to make any changes. But the contemplation is the next step where you can recognize, like, some shit ain't right now. Right. And so I think I need to make some changes. That happened, throughout a series of events, right? A series of incarcerations. Every incarceration that I had during, I wanted to get out and be who I am today, right? I wanted to change. I would do all the classes, do all the programming while still, partaking and upholding that reputation so that I
Yeah.
could safely do those courses without being picked on for being a nerd, or, oh, this guy only, he's a geek or whatever, because in the prison system, these types of things were frowned upon. Like, you couldn't be all up in the school floor or all up around the guards and doing positive things when you're
Yeah.
supposed to be this gang member, right? This
So it's kind of a catch-22. It's like, I need to maintain both things. I want to get better here, but I can't because I got to maintain this reputation for my safety.
Exactly, because the first fight I ever lost was against my own nature. I'm sensitive. I like reading. I like learning things. I'm really, like, connected with nature, and I love animals and all these different things. And I like to be good to women. Like, back then, when people would be like, "Oh, my B," I'd be like, "That's my girl." Like, y'all call her a B, we got problems, right? So I always
Yeah.
had this, like parents of friends that I used to have out here would always be like, oh, he's so polite. And I'll help with the dishes and be super polite to parents. And then they would hear these stories and be like, not him, right? That kid is so sweet, right? But that was my nature. The other things was adapted behaviors, maladaptive behaviors to survive the narrative that I thought I could never get out of. So even though internally I was always this kid that wanted to help people, and all the conversations I used to have with guys would be on that kind of like life coaching kind of conversations, right? I'm trying to help them, like, hey, guys would bring me letters in prison and be like, hey, can you help me with this? Like, she's gonna leave me, and so I'd help draft letters to hopefully mitigate that circumstance, and so I've always had that, wanting to help people and people coming to me and sharing things with me that they weren't sharing with other guys. And so, I would be the teacher's aide in the school floors when I was in prisons. I would be, in trusted positions or like a tier rep for units where they talk to the guys in there about better conditions. And I always felt more myself in those roles, even incarcerated, than in the leadership role in the gang impacted life, right? So there's many, many times where, um, I wanted to get out and do right. And then there was just the circumstances and the internal belief that I couldn't, or I wasn't allowed, or I had to, maybe I told myself that if I stopped, being involved with the gang life, then I would lose my life over it. Right. So there was this compulsion and this big lie, right, that I had to continue down the path that I was going in order to survive. Like, that was where my camaraderie, my love, my connection came from, right? And that was important to me at the time because, no father in the house. My mom was, very corporal, coming from New York, being a West Indian. That was the cultural norm. Your kids didn't do what you said; they put hands on you, right? So I had a lot of internal anger
Yeah.
towards the people and the systems that were supposed to, protect and pour into me and
Yeah.
build me up and give me the emotional intelligence skills to not crash out every time someone looked at me wrong, or, I felt scared, then I would just crash out, and then I'd be locked up, or I'd have a warrant, or, things like that. So there's not really one particular moment that I could like point to that says this is when I decided to change. But I can say, my last time in was my last time in, and in large part because I started to change my agreements with the narrative that I had been living. I started to see in my last time that I actually could do these things, and that this whole time, essentially, I had been scammed, right? I started to
Wow.
feel
Yeah.
the anger towards the narrative I had received from the big homies and the street life and the gang life and the code. And I started to look at it differently. And it was an old head that said to me something along the lines of, how do you feel about cults? Right. I think we were watching something about that. It was a big famous cult that happened, and I was incarcerated. We were watching it, and we were having this conversation about that. And, naturally my reaction, I was like, that's wild. Like, that's crazy. That's weird. Like, I would never, and then he said to me something that I've said in many, many trainings since then. And he said, if you took the DNA strains of cult and gang, he said, how different do you think they'd actually be? It's like, you've been in a cult your whole life. And that might have been the shift that was like, I'm not no effing cult. But then when you map them onto each other, right? The disregard for life, the agenda that they have without care for you. So you got the big homies that'll be like, hey, go do this thing. And they'll watch you do it and put your life in danger. And that's celebrated. That is cultish like behavior.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, when someone's deliberately, intentionally sending you to your doom, and gaslighting you that this is, something that you're going to get congratulated for, and this is, something that is going to become an accolade for you if you're successful on this mission, right? And
Hmm.
yeah, I think that really is what kind of broke my mind open in a good way, to where I started to see, like, look, I am in a cult. This is
Huh.
very cult-like philosophies and ideologies that we live by. And then I started to, like a 2-year-old who learns to say no for the first time, I started to just be like, nah, I don't agree with that.
Yeah.
We're in prison. People are like, hey, you have to, and we have to. And I'm like, by whose authority? Like, who said? When's the last time any
Mm.
of you guys that follow this prison constitution and these politics, first of all, they were written over 100 years ago by people that are no longer in this compound. Even our government changes laws and makes amendments to the Constitution every 3
Mm.
months, it seems like, right? When's when's the last time we did that in here? When's the last time we actually looked at this so-called prison politic constitutional rules and things that we must abide by, and we're stabbing each other over it and all these different things? When has anybody sat at the table and made amendments and actually thought about it? You're following
That's
something.
good.
Yeah, I was like, we're following blindly, which is completely contradictory to the whole mentality of, oh, if you're an outlaw, if you're a gangster, you're real, if break the law and all these things, but you're following laws
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
were
I think
written by.
that, yeah, for sure. And I think that statement resonates personally too. Like, you know, when is the last time somebody, looked at themselves internally and says, by what authority do I have to do this?
Hmm.
Why am I doing what I'm doing? And did I know that I can change that? One of my favorite quotes, I mention it often, is by Socrates. It says, "A life not that's not examined is not worth living." You
Come
know,
on.
and so many times people just they don't examine themselves. They don't want to change it, and they can, but they just don't.
Yeah, yeah. So when I wrote my first, it's just like I said, it's a 80 page kind of a lesson based autobiography. It's called the Coach B's 4 Cycles of Freedom. That's what I asked in like the intro. It was like the question that changed my life, that probably really started creating the external practices that led to where I am today, was, by whose authority? Because it got to a
That's
point
good.
where I was physically feared. I can defend myself fairly well, right? And I was intellectually respected. So I had good ideas. I didn't send people on missions that where they crash and burn, and so as a leader role that I had in the incarceral system, I just started implementing more positive indoctrination in our group, in our particular gang, right? Where we weren't, just simple things like, you're not allowed to gamble against each other, right? Because there's things where guys inside the same group or gang would be sitting at poker tables, owing each other money, and then fighting about the money that the girlfriend didn't send on the streets, things like that. So I started
Mm.
to create this positive kind of spin on, hey, it's kind of like there's the Constitution, and then there's your state revised, like Washington State has the RCW, which is the revised Constitute Code of Washington, right? And so I kind of started leaning towards, like, hey, we have these prison politics, but here's how we're going to operate within those.
Mm.
And it became more of a, do your own thing unless there's an emergency type of philosophy, and let's focus on how we could do better. Halfway or more than halfway through my sentence, almost all the people I was associated with, were coming in or already had wives and kids. So it's like, you say you value your wife and you say you value your kids, but you're doing things in here which will keep you from getting to them sooner. That makes no sense.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
started to do the internal critique on my own value system. I got family first tatted on my hands, but I kept going back to prison. How does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
Counterproductive.
before I was willing to even do an internal critique on someone else's values and beliefs, I did it on myself, and I started to
Mm.
create a different narrative, because I was like, actually, by whose authority? Like, that is one of the most profound questions I've ever asked myself, because it's by our own agreement. Our narratives that we live are by our own agreement. I said in a recent meeting that, if you believe in magic, right? People cannot cast spells on you, but they can trick you into casting them on yourself.
Mm.
It's by your own agreement that you live by external narratives, because once you agree to it, it becomes an internal narrative. So now you've been influenced which creates your thinking, which creates your behavior and your habits, and thus your reality. Stop
Yeah.
agreeing back here at step one when someone says, "Hey, you're actually this and you should be doing that, and that's probably not a good look for you." And you're like, "Yeah, you're right." You've now agreed, you've cast a spell on yourself. But if
Yeah.
you're like, "No, I don't agree with that at all. I'm going to keep going the way I'm going because I do think I can do this. I do believe that I'm capable. And if you don't support me, deuces."
Right. Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then
Yeah.
that creates a whole world of different opportunities and doors you can walk through. And once you build that habit, like once you get exposed to something like that the first time, you want more.
Yeah.
Right? Like I said, it's
Yeah.
like that 2-year-old or that 1.5-year-old who learns no, and they just can't. They love this independence. They love the ability to turn down what you're saying. That's a part
Hmm.
of growth and development. When you put
Yeah.
a kid in prison at 12, 15, 16, or 17, now we're talking about arrested development. Now there is no emotional regulation muscle. There's no EQ building. They're either smart or they're intellectually malnourished. I don't think people are dumb inherently. I think that if you have a child and they die from hunger, it's because you didn't nourish them. So intellectually, I think it's the same. Someone that's intellectually malnourished might be very capable of having a high IQ and being a genius or getting high scores in school. But if no one ever showed them how or poured into them or explained to them the why, right? That is our biggest motivator. If we don't know why we're doing what we're doing or no one explains it, how actually invested are we going to be in that engagement or that process?
Hmm.
That's where
Yeah.
the
100.
mentors, the fathers, the
Right.
dual parent households, can play a big role in, the fight against recidivism and just, you know, people having to not live the journey that I lived to come to the same conclusion that it was a scam.
Yeah. 100%. And on that note, you're talking about helping people not live what you had to go through. I mean, now you're a certified peer counselor. You're a podcaster. You a life coach. You work for the DOC. Help people with reentry. What made you? I mean, obviously
We're gonna
your
say
past and
I'll just want to stop you and just say entry,
yeah,
right? Integration
yeah,
and entry, because reentry, in my opinion, indicates like going back to, right?
okay,
But the person that does 5 years, A, isn't the person who gets out, and B, the
yeah,
society isn't the same as it was when they left.
yeah,
So this is a
okay.
person entering society for the first time.
Wow, wow. Thanks for clarifying that. That's good. So, um, I mean, so as I was saying, obviously, what you went through, you're passionate about helping people not have to go through that. But kind of take us through how you knew this was your calling. What made you want to work with the DOC and fulfill this calling going forward?
So I guess we'll just start with my last incarceration in the feds. It was during COVID. It was a lot going on. It was tremendously traumatic and stressful. But I'd always, like I was telling you before, in every bid I've done, 11 was the longest stretch, but I've done like a 2 and then a 4, things like that. I was always in those roles of like mentorship, facilitating groups, or a TA on the school floor, so I always worked um, side by side with educators and people that believed in change and hope and changing narratives. It's just this last time down, I really figured out that it was possible for me to do it um without being a hypocrite, like, right, without, I used to help people get into treatment while, fronting their spouse a bunch of drugs. You know what I mean? And so there was always that like hypocrisy. It's like, yes, I'm this dealer, but if you need help or if you want to stop, I'll make the rest of the people around me stop selling to you so that you could get clean. Right. So there
Mm.
was always this like this war, this polarity within me about like,
Yeah.
you know, I know this is a money thing because I personally didn't do the drugs that I sold. Right. And I would see the pain that it was causing people. But then there was that part of me that told myself, but they want to do this. And who, if not me, someone else is going to sell it to, you know, so there was always this like, I guess, you know, angel devil shoulder thing. You're right. When we think of
Yeah.
that picture, right? Where it's like, no,
Yeah.
no, no, get the money. If they want to quit, they will. And if they do, then you can help them. But this is how you're eating. This is who you are. And this is all you'll ever be. So just do what you can within the constraints of your situation. Right.
Yeah.
So when I was down this time, I actually, COVID happened and then it was over a month of complete isolation. You know, they panicked to the utmost when we were in there. So like there were guards coming into unit in full hazmat suits. We were locked in our cells days and weeks, sometimes at a time without showering or interacting or being able to use the phones. And it was during one of those initial kind of like panic reactions where we were sitting in our cells by ourselves. I started to pen a curriculum, and that first curriculum I ever wrote was called A Better Place, and the acronym was called Pursuing Life After Crime Education. And then when we first came off our first lockdown, I had this thick yellow legal pads, you know, the longer ones, like the 9x12 ones, right?
Yeah.
And it was 80 to 100 pages of handwritten curriculum, 4 distinct parts, you know, based on my lived experience, based on the fact that during all of my incarcerations, I had taken every program that DLC had to offer, right? Whatever it was, parenting, anger management, thinking for a change, budgeting, just whatever they had offered, I signed up for. And so I had all of this knowledge, and I'm thinking, I've been down over 8 times and none of those things have worked. What was the missing piece? And it all boiled down to relatability, lived experience. These curriculums lacked the voice of people like me. So these curriculums always came off as a theoretical way for them to basically check a box, right? In theory, this would work for you. And we're clinicians, we're the doctors, we know better, right? But none of you know our actual day-to-day struggle in life. None of you know our emotional disposition or the traumas that we navigate and survive on a daily basis, right? And you're asking us to heal and work on our trauma while living in it. Being incarcerated is traumatic. No matter your position in the system. It doesn't matter if you're the top guy that nobody would even dare touch. You're still incarcerated. It's still traumatic. And so when I wrote this, I wrote it from the lens of what would work for us, right? And so I had about 30 guys, 2 15-man, I guess, pilot groups, and then the reentry specialist, the actual staff of the SeaTac Federal Detention Center I was at, got wind of it because I'd sent it home in its yellow written form, and my best friend's mom at the time was in the field, was working with the True Blood grant in Washington, doing you know, behavioral health recovery, and she's like, I'm going to type this up for you in my free time, and I'm going to use it out here. And so that was the spark. That was I guess, the validation that I needed to be like, you know what, I can do this. And that is where I started to become in alignment with my assignment, is the phrase I often use. You'll see it under, you know, my Facebook tag, and because that's where I'm at. I'm in alignment with my assignment. I'm now not fighting my nature. I'm now, you know, avid, you know, preserver of life. The highest ethical standard in the peer field and behavioral health field is do no harm, right? And the preservation of life, you know. And so I operate within my calling now. That's the difference. And it started with that first curriculum that a staff and someone on the streets doing the work validated by saying, I want this, I'm going to use this, this works. And so I did 2 piloted groups in there while I was in there with their kind of oversight and permission. And then it kind of became a thing. So it affected my sentencing, which at the time that wasn't even on my radar. I had never been to the Fed, so I didn't even know how that worked. I was just answering a calling. I was compelled to write that thing. I wrote it, got it typed, got it refined, and it became an actual curriculum. And then I got sent to Terminal Island in California, where they had a residential drug abuse program, which is like a 9-month long program. You do the program, you do all this, emotional intelligence, unpacking and cognitive behavioral change. And I became a mentor and a Toastmaster and a seminar supervisor for that program, got extra time off, got to the Feds. And then immediately I was introduced to what they call Recovery Coach Academy out at a peer-run organization called Peer Olympia in Washington. And so at the halfway house, I went to that academy, got that certificate, but it was just like I needed more. I wanted more. And also there was that, I wouldn't call it imposter syndrome, but there was this reality that I knew or believed that I had to have more of an equalizer when it came to credentials, right? I couldn't just get out and be like, well, I just got out of prison, I'm an expert, right? So I started to just take trainings and courses and really immerse myself into the behavioral health space, and really apply myself. And then I got a job at that same place, Peer Olympia, where I started as a family reunification specialist. And then I ended up on a drug court board for a year, making changes with the drug court community. And from there, it just, doors and doors and doors.
Yeah.
And it was really, because I changed my agreement with the narrative that, with the deck of cards that was given to me. Right. And I was like, I don't like this deck. I'm not going to play the cards I was dealt. I'm going to create a new deck, and kind of like
Yeah.
the Magic game. I built my own deck and I started pursuing it and ignoring the naysayers, ignoring the people that would say like, you can't, we don't believe you, we don't trust it. One thing I
Sure.
know is when you're spiritual and when you have a relationship with the higher power, you don't have to convince anyone that you're good because your heart is already known. And so I stopped trying to convince people to trust me and just moved in the direction of what was compelling me to do right, to pour into my community, to create a nonprofit that to this day, 3 years going, never received a state or federal grant. And we've helped over 500 families in different ways, from backpack drives to Easter baskets at work releases and halfway houses. And
Let's go.
yeah, 26, we started a 2026 acts of service project where we're actually developing a hub for community service, kind of like a labor ready. It doesn't exist anywhere, right? So where can you go through like municipal court or even high school that needs to do volunteer work? Where's the site or the app that you can go to just get plugged into those community service projects?
Yeah. I'd like to
So,
leave the link for all of those as well. So I have to ask because, you're an expert in anger management. And that is something I think that all men struggle with. Some higher degrees, some to lower degrees. I know me, I've had to overcome a lot of, anger management. But since you're on the show, man, I have to ask your specialties on that. Give us kind of a deep dive into how men can really start to overcome anger problems and just what that looks like.
okay, so to start, remember earlier I talked about language, right? Language
Mm.
matters. Anger is never a problem. Aggression is. A
Oh,
response
that's
to
good.
anger is, right? So the first thing we have to do is differentiate anger from behavior. And I did one of the one of the books I published was specifically, and that was by demand, right? I'd already published 4 or 5, a parenting one, just some kind of like emotional intelligence tools, and another one, and then the We Are What We Agree To is more focused on the post-incarceration syndrome and trauma and how to navigate and change your narrative. But then they're like, but you're a certified anger management specialist. You do speaking on this, and I was recognized on the website that certifies in the nation for these things. I was their spotlight, their highlight, specialist or whatever. And then I got invited to a secular AA meeting for anger management piece. And what I realized again is the book I created is called How to Train Your Lizard. Right. And we talk about the amygdala as our reptile brain. And so I
like it.
I kind of play on that analogy. Right. And it's separating the two. Another psychologist had said, if you could name it, you can tame it. Right. So I add to that. Right. If you can name it, you can tame it, you can change it. If you think you have an anger problem, that's the problem. Our amygdalas are hardwired to keep us alive. So when your amygdala fires off and sends all those chemicals into your body, it's because you think you're in danger.
Yeah.
So the first thing we have to do is train our lizard, train our amygdala to not respond to things that aren't actually dangerous.
Yeah.
Right? When someone calls you a name through a phone or you're arguing, there's no actual inherent danger of your life being lost. So when we can change it and say, hey, your lizard's waking up, right? We separate ourselves from it. The nature of anger is that anger itself is nature. You can't take a pill and make the storm stop, right? So we don't control anger. We don't manage anger. What we do control and manage is our thoughts and actions, which is aggression. So somebody says something, the narrative you tell yourself, whatever that narrative is, it's based on a value system. If those values that you have go all the way back to something that you hold dear as part of your identity, and then you perceive that as a threat, the amygdala doesn't differentiate threat to rep or threat to life. It just responds. It does what it's hardwired to do, which is send those signals and get you prepared, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, right? When you're appeasing people. And so if you know these things and know how to differentiate the two, what you can now do is when you feel something, you can acknowledge it and be like, oh, okay, I see my lizard's awake. What's happening what's happening right now? Yeah. What am I experiencing and why? And so I developed these different kind of cue cards where it's called like the belief check system. When you're in something, the card I use is called the AC tool card. And AC stands for authentic curiosity, but it's a play on AC, right? Because any big emotions physiologically heat up our bodies. When adrenaline's pumping, our temperature is physically where we get hot. That's why we say that. Oh, I'm heated right now, right? Yeah. You're physically, sometimes you can feel it in your ears, depending on the person. Anger could show up in your stomach. It could show up in your jaw, right? But the temperature goes up. As humans, when we're hot, we seek AC, the comfort of being cooled down, right? So when I created the AC tool card, I was thinking about, okay, when this trigger happens and you start to feel your temperature rise, cut on the AC. And that AC is authentic curiosity, which is internalized. So you start asking yourself, why is this even bothering me? What value or what's at stake here? Why am I even, what's happening right now? Is this an actual danger to me? Or is this something from my past that's reminded me of a time when I was in danger? So am I responding to the here and now, or am I responding to yesterday? And is this a trained automatic response? Right. So now you get from reacting to responding with a little internal critique of yourself.
That's good. And that's like kind of why they say, hey, go splash some water on your face or take a cold shower or something like that. Get that temperature down. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So the big question there is, how do you get from immediately blowing up to taking a second and thinking about it first? Because a lot of times, like I still do this sometimes, but when something initially happens and it makes you angry, you're immediately just like, well, that's not fair. Or, I don't like it, whatever. And you're like, oh crap, I talked without even taking a second. How do you train yourself to take that initial second to think before you react?
Well, you said it. You train yourself.
Yeah.
You train your lizard. Train your lizard to obey your commands and to work for you and not against you. Even my 11-year-old, when I first published the book, she had like pierced her nose without permission. And, I was heated, but then because I do this work and I really believe in it, I cut on my own AC and I'm like, why am I even so mad about this? Like, what's actually at stake? Like, why do I feel I have to be rah rah with her? And then so I turned on the AC for myself and then I used it on her. And I said, what were you thinking when you did this thing? And I got genuinely curious, and the authenticity of my curiosity pulled it out of her, where she didn't feel like she was being grilled or lectured. She could feel that I was genuinely curious, and therefore the answer was more forthcoming. Well, I thought, and then I started to pull it out. And then I was like, well, there's still a consequence, but I'll give you a deal. This book, can I show it?
Absolutely.
So this is the How to Train Your Lizard.
Love it.
22 chapters, interactive guided lessons and exercises. And I told her, you can do this book in its entirety, your month of restriction will be mitigated by you completing all of these chapters. And I know your life, so you can't lie when you're answering the questions. I'm going to check them. And so she did the thing, right? And it ultimately changed the way she started interacting with her brother, with me, I caught her the weekend after she completed the book, teaching it to one of her friends in her room when I was walking by. And
wow.
It dawned on me that what we lack in our households often, especially in the, revolving door of incarceration, culture and families, is emotional regulation being a prerequisite before we even like send our kids off to school. Start having those conversations early about like, hey, it's okay to feel like that, but let's talk about it. Let's investigate. Let's do an internal critique on why you're so mad. Why is this so unfair? What makes it fair, or what would make it fair? And where does that come from? What is the metric system that you in your 11 years of life is using to determine if something is fair or not? Right. And I started to really create some like intellectual dialogue with my daughter around these emotionally regulating concepts. And again, to this day, there's times where she'll come to me and, tears. Maybe she was just arguing with her mom or somebody else. And I would tell her like, hey, I only talk to humans. So go put your lizard up and then come back to me and tell me so I can hear you. Because if your lizard starts talking, the only person that understands lizard is my lizard.
Yeah.
So now we got two lizards interacting. That's not good for anyone. So
good.
Go upstairs, come back down, go. It's like if your kid had a dog that bit kids. Eventually, either their kids don't come over or you get rid of the dog. But if the dog is mandatory, then you have to train the dog not to bite people.
Yeah.
You just have to. It's imperative, right? So that's our lizard. Our lizard is a part of our makeup. It's stock. It comes stock with every human. You have your amygdala, you have your lizard brain, your reptile brain. Right. It's millions of years old. It's placed, and its sole purpose is also the preservation of life.
Yeah.
So my lizard and my work is in alignment.
Yeah.
So training it is just a reconstruction of the way I look at it. And that can be good for everybody.
Absolutely. Wow. I love that, man. Because the reptilian brain, I mean, is what you're referencing. And I love that you took a spin on it with the lizard. I mean, that's so cool, man. I'm going to get that book. That's really cool.
Yeah, and we have this one. This is the other one. We Are What We Agree To. And like I said, the beauty about the things is I didn't write just books to read. These are, workbooks. Even though it's a 6x9, it's small. But this is something that you can carry around and do the work on, where I believe in I believe in application, right? I believe in different levels of intelligence. Like, you can be smart, right? And that means you can learn things long enough, like memorize them long enough to take an exam and pass it, right? That's smart. That's a smart person. But an intelligent person is going to retain that information and take that same exam maybe 6 months later and get a similar or the same or even a better score because they've been thinking about it and applying it.
Mm.
Right. And then a wise person can articulate it to another human being in their language and teach it out. So I think we have to, take all three of those stages and then realize there's stages to EQ, which is your emotional intelligence, that also need to be brought in. There's actually studies out there. There was a study done I had read where they said, there were people with really, really high IQs that were in 70% of the case, number might be a little off, but it was a high percentage, were outperformed by people with lower IQs but higher EQs because they were more emotionally intelligent. I don't care how smart you are. We're humans. If you can't read the room or emotionally connect or be relatable to another human, you're not going to be as successful as somebody who can.
Yeah, that's true. 100%. Well, man, we have talked about so much good stuff. My last question for you would really be, what would you, I mean, there's all kinds of people listening to this, so different walks of life, but what would you leave us with? Just anything that you would leave us with.
Again, I believe that we all are, let's just say we're all individual businesses, right? And if we don't do quarterly meetings with ourselves, with our values, with our beliefs, really, really do internal critiques on your own situation, and ask yourself a set of questions that will determine if the people in your life should still be there, if the job you're doing should still be something you're pursuing, if the things that you believe that you're willing to argue and fight for, the people that are, go on social media and pick a side or whatever, like really challenge those beliefs and ask yourself, is it worth the negative energy that you invest into something when it actually doesn't affect your day-to-day interaction with human beings? I believe engagement is the outcome. And, if we engage and we show up and we hold space and we're authentically ourselves, unapologetically us, it's really hard to operate under the narrative of society or external. And when it comes to politics, I always say this: the red or the blue, it's great. Like while you're fighting over the sides, the people who made them up are having dinner together.
Mm.
The people who created the sides that you're fighting for are on the same side. They're on the same team. So, just think about that when you're standing on, you're identifying yourself. It's that same behavior that gangs and cults operate under. There's a particular message, and if it's not that, you are to violently oppose the other message. And that's not conducive of living a decent human life, right? Why waste energy? We only have a certain amount of energy. I call it currency. If you only are allotted an allowance every day of a certain amount of currency, which is your energy, your time, your thoughts, and your efforts, why would you squander it by spending it on things that don't serve you versus investing it in being good to people and being authentic and being curious and studying things or pursuing passions that you love? And also, the last thing I'll leave you with is program yourself with all of the things that you believe you are as a person. For example, my office, everywhere I look is a message, right? I look forward by my computer. I see a feelings wheel. We are what we agree to. Never stop dreaming. Good things come to those who hustle. The four agreements. Everywhere I look, there's something that resonates. We can indoctrinate and program ourselves the same way that the programs that we watch were designed to.
Yeah, it's true. You can choose your own content.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's good. 100%, man. Well, hey, I'm going to leave all of your links in the show notes. What is the best way for people to get a hold of you if they want more of Coach B?
The best way would just probably be coachb360.net. I do Thriving Thursdays, and it's national. So like there's people from different states. It's a Zoom meeting from 6 to 8, and we just come in and we talk positive stuff. We collaborate. There's people that do presentations, talk about their books, do slideshows. Like it's just a space. It's called Independent Hope Dealers. And if you go to the second page on my website, you can actually I hyperlinked it so you can click right into the Zoom meeting on that day at that time. Every Thursday, Pacific time. I'm in Washington State. So yeah, so every Thursday evening we do it from 6 to 8. Next week I'll actually be doing a topic called Casualties of Growth. The price of success. And I'll be talking about, things like that. But it's an open forum. So sometimes it's a panel of like professionals. Like if you came on there, I might do an open panel where the coaches are listed in the panel, and then people can just come say, hey, I got this going on. And all the coaches take a stab at helping them out with it. Right. It's just Independent
Nice.
Hope Dealers, a place of unconditional positive regard. That's my one rule.
That's good. That's good. I like it. Well, man, thank you so much. I'm really appreciative of you. So much for you as a coach and what you're doing, your perspectives, your advice, and your friendship. Really appreciate you, brother.
Yeah, man, stay in touch. And
Absolutely.
if y'all do Facebook, it's Bilal H. Willis. I have the blue badge, so it's verified. You'll know it's the right one. It's Bilal. H is my middle initial, and then Willis is my last name. You can find me on there. That's where I post all of my kind of updates, and things been different because working with DLC, I'm not allowed to actually do reentry work in the streets anymore, because when you're DLC, you can't work or have like relationships with people that are under the jurisdiction of DLC. So I had to like reshift my whole board and everything with my nonprofit so that I could go in and do this work. Not a sacrifice, just a shift, a pivot, right? But for people that do still want to, like you said, get more Coach B, come to the Independent Hope Dealer Zoom meeting or follow me on social media.
Sounds great, brother. Again, thanks again, man. Have a great day.
Appreciate the invite. Send me the link when it drops.
Yes, sir.
All right, take care.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope you enjoyed today's guest. And I just wanted to say that if this has made you think, if this has sparked something in you, maybe about your purpose or your relationship with God, I just want to encourage you to not let that moment pass. If you're ready to take that next step and connect with me personally, you can reach out to me through my email, which is jason@rebuiltlifecoach.com, or you can go to my website at www.rebuiltlifecoach.com. And if you're serious about building a stronger, faith-driven life, please go check out that program. Thank you for listening, and as always, keep walking in purpose and growing in faith. I'll catch you next time.